Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We're just doing a test. Do we have Effie Triantafilopoulos on the line? I believe.
Good morning. Yes, I'm here.
Good morning. Thank you. Delighted that we've all been able to connect. Thank you so much. So I think in the interest of time, we'll get started. Apologies, everyone, for the slight delay in commencing this morning. Thank you so much to all of you for joining Team Burlington's COVID-19 Virtual Business Support Forum today. Team Burlington represents the coordinated efforts of all of Burlington's business organizations to bring information to the business community during this very difficult time. And so this forum is really powered by the Burlington Chamber of Commerce, Burlington Economic Development, our two business improvement areas, Burlington Downtown, as well as Aldershot Village, and Tourism Burlington is also a participant. And this organization of the business community is further supported by the City of Burlington. So today is part 2 of our business support series. We're going to be focusing on provincial and federal issues today and all of the work that these two levels of government are doing to support the business community during this unprecedented time. We've captured insights from all of you who have registered, as well as those who registered for the first part of the series, and we've organized your questions and comments and concerns into a series of themes, and we'll be posing questions to a very distinguished roster of panelists this morning. During the first half of today's call, we're going to be hearing from MPP Jane Mckenna, MPP Effie Triantafilopoulos, Oakville, North Burlington. At 10:30 a.m., we're going to be joined by the Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction, the Honorable Prabmeet Sarkaria. And then at 10:45, we're going to shift into the federal sphere of jurisdiction, and we'll be hearing from the Honorable Karina Gould, not only our local MP in Burlington, but also the Minister of International Development. We have MP Pam Damoff also joining us. And then finally, the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, Mélanie Joly. So thank you all for participating and for joining us today. And with that, I think we'll move right into our content. And I'd like to introduce Jane Mckenna. And Jane, perhaps you could give us a bit of a high-level overview of what is being done by the provincial government at this time to support businesses through the COVID-19 crisis.
Thanks so much, Carla, and I appreciate all this hard work that everybody in Burlington, Tourism Burlington, everybody that you mentioned so far, and yourself, because keeping people educated is our top priority, and you've done a phenomenal job with doing that. So thanks. I just wanted to throw that out there first. So as you can see, things change by the hour, and we want to continue to make sure that we stop the spread of COVID-19. So we're going to continue, to making sure, the most important thing is that people are safe, people are keeping their physical distance, and that, the numbers do decrease. You've asked the question, how is this being enforced? So to report an incident of non-compliance with emergency orders, contact the Houghton Region Police COVID-19 hotline. I'll say it a couple times, 905-825-4722. Again, that's 905-825-4722. And, people are being very respectful when they are calling over to that number because, as we saw on the weekend, there was, a family in Brampton, there was a party in a backyard with 20 people, and that fine has now gone up exponentially and is now going to court, and they will make that final decision. So we're just trying to, make sure that people are respecting what exactly is happening. That's one. And then also we have a lot of calls here at the office. We are here every day about businesses and where they can get more information because things are so fluid and changing so rapidly. We want to make sure that people are getting the information that they want. So businesses, I'll give you that number out, is 1-888-478-5655. 1-888-444-3659. Again, 1-888-444-3659. And please, at any time, if you need to reach out to our office, please don't hesitate to call us here. We are here. We've extended our hours, so we are, there's 4 of us in this office daily from 8:30 to 7. So please, continue to reach out to us as well. And then for employees, because we do have a lot of people calling, because when you look at, for an example, manufacturing, it is broad in that spectrum of what we have there. So we do have people calling and saying, we see that so-and-so is open. To me, I don't think that's an essential service. But then we also have a supply chain reason of why some of these companies are open. And I can tell you this, a lot of, I'll say 99% of the businesses that are working here are complying and doing everything they possibly can. The majority of their employees are at home, and the ones that have to be at the office, they are 6 feet apart. They're all doing, working extremely hard to comply and make sure their employees are safe. Because as we all know, we all work together as a team, and our employees are an extension of our family. So we want to make sure that everybody is, not getting ill and passing the COVID-19 on. So the employees can contact the employment standards information, which is 1-800-531-5551. So the question you asked me, Carla, was, can we expect any more changes? Well, as I said, everything changes by the hour, and things do change, nonstop. And our biggest goal is to make sure that we don't have any more deaths. 1 death is too many, and that we don't have more people, getting the COVID-19. So we want to, things are constantly fluid. Our biggest thing is, making sure that people are safe and that they're healthy and reducing the spread. So that's, our number one thing. So things could change again. We'll have to wait and see. As you see, the Prime Minister is on at, I think it's 11:14 every day, and then the Premier is on at 1 o'clock every day. So, we're getting changes and updated, as things, move along. And then you're asking about local businesses and retooling. Well, as you've recognized that we're in a bit of a predicament right now with PPE, just because, we don't make PPEs basically here. So you've heard the Premier say over and over again, he won't be put in a position to ever be counting on, somebody else to give us the equipment that we need. So if you go on ontario.ca/Ontario Together, there is, if you scroll down, there is an Ontario Together fund, which is $50 million that the province has brought forward, just to make sure that if you have the ability to retool and get, to do other things, because there are a lot of companies here in Ontario that are stepped up to the plate, and maybe they didn't make it, but they have the capacity to do it with a few extra components to be able to get the assembly line going for that. There is that, again, it's ontario.ca/Ontario Together. And if you scroll down on that, there is funding for $50 million available to companies that want to be able to do that. The next thing is that, you want to make sure that, we have a lot of people, we're checking that this is constantly. It's amazing the innovation and the innovative people that have gone on onto the Ontario Together that have helped us out as a province, that have said, hey, how about doing this, and how about looking at this, and they fill all that out. And that has been absolutely phenomenal. And maybe not just about, trying to get the PPEs, but looking at other ways that, we can help people with mental health. And, those lines have just been, it's actually mind-boggling that so many people had such wonderful innovation that we continue to get daily, hourly on Ontario Together. So I want everyone to continue doing that. And then also people that, that do have the PPE products that they can get for us here. We need those desperately, right? So my daughter's a nurse, along with many other nurses, but I just don't want to just talk about nurses and doctors. As you know, over at any hospital, it's everybody that's there, that's on the front lines, that are working, regardless of what, capacity that you're in, that we all need to, continue to make safe. So I think I've answered just about everything. If there's something else you'd like me to say, please don't, please don't hesitate to jump in.
No, that's been extremely, extremely helpful. Effie, can I ask you a question? Beyond what Jane has described the considerable support that's being provided to the business community, the focus on innovation, supporting businesses with retooling. Can I ask you just to comment on some of the other things the government may be contemplating? We've been hearing a lot from tenants, small businesses, about the need for rent relief, that notwithstanding all of the other supports that are in place, this is an outstanding issue of concern, and many of them are truly concerned about their ability to make rent payments during this difficult time when many of them are confronted with a cash flow crisis.
Good morning, Carla, and good morning to all the other panelists. As a first phase, I know that my colleague Shane touched on this. Our government introduced an economic update in the legislature on March the 25th. And in this first phase, our government set aside $10 billion to improve cash flows for people and for businesses. And I think that's where you're going to find most of our support exists today. So here are some of the things that the government chose to focus on as a first step. And that is, in terms of the employer health tax, this was meant to help businesses during this crisis. And the government is proposing to double the employer health tax exemption in this year, 2020. Through this change, about 57,000 private sector employers will be paying less EHT this year, including about 30,000 more who will not pay any EHT at all. So this is a tax cut of about $355 million. As well as this, the government wanted to add some flexibility to businesses in Ontario in order to be able to meet their tax obligations during the crisis. So from April 1st this year until August 31st, there will be interest and penalty free for businesses who are unable to file and make payments on time for their different provincial administered taxes. And this is expected to free up as much as $6 billion in cash flow for about 100,000 businesses over the next 5 months. So these measures are meant to complement what the federal government is already doing and announced on March the 18th, that would provide added relief from interest and penalties from not remitting corporate income tax owing. We also moved ahead in order to deal with WSIB premiums. And so that's a relief of about $1.9 billion for employers, where they will see their premium payments deferred for 6 months for all businesses in the province. Again, all employers covered by WSIB workplace insurance are automatically eligible for this provision of relief package, and they can defer premium reporting and payments until August 31st of this year. They will not be required to opt in to receive the benefit. This will be an average business. This will save the average business about $1,760. It's important, particularly on the WSIB, because with ceasing their interest accrual on all outstanding premium payments, they will not be charged penalties during that 6-month deferral period. And so there will be no negative consequences for their businesses who defer the premium reporting and payments. In addition, the other thing that we've done, and this is also to give some flexibility to municipalities, $1.8 billion will be deferred through the June 30th quarterly municipal remittance of the education property tax to school boards. So this allows the municipalities to actually defer property taxes for businesses and for residents. And the other thing that we did, and this is tied specifically to residential, farms, and small businesses, the government moved to basically have an off-peak electricity price rate 24/7 for the next 45 days. So this will basically be an electricity rate at the lowest rate, and we'll see a reduction of over 50% compared to on-peak rates. So we're working really closely with all levels of government, and we'll consider all available options to get through these difficult and uncertain times. You've talked specifically about this issue of rent and the fact that businesses are also beginning to feel the stress there. Up till now, the government has addressed residential rents and made it clear that no evictions are going to be allowed during this period of time. But I know that both my colleague Jane and I have heard a number of businesses communicating with our offices and saying that they would like some stress relief on business leases as well. So the important thing at this point is to know that everything is on the table. The Premier has made it clear that these are our first measures, and we'll continue to look at other ways in which we can support our small business and medium business community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Effie. We appreciate that overview. Certainly, there were a significant number of measures introduced during the most recent economic update. Again, very welcome news for the business community during this time. One of the areas that we're receiving a lot of questions about is support for nonprofits and charities. At this time, those many organizations that support those who are vulnerable within our community are feeling particularly taxed. They're noticing dramatic increases in demand for their services. Is there anything else, Jane or Effie, that's being contemplated right now in order to assist those organizations who are also experiencing significant reductions in their revenue streams at this time?
Jane, would you like to start, or do you want me to jump in here? Hello?
Jane, are you there?
Yeah, so Effie, you just start and then I'll jump in.
Okay, great. So you're quite right, Carla, that the not-for-profit sector and the charities organizations are feeling very much the crunch. A lot of the vulnerable population is obviously a group of people that we can't allow to fall between cracks. As part of our economic statement that was introduced in the legislature by our Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, on March the 25th, the Ontario government indicated they're providing $200 million in social services relief, funding various projects that will address the most vulnerable people. And the funding is going to be provided to municipalities and organizations that currently administer those social services. And some of those providers in our Burlington and actually our Halton community are the shelters, the food banks, emergency services, charities, not-for-profits. They're going to be able to add additional staff and help keep their clients safe and healthy during this period. As an example, $10 million was provided to help community organizations actually be able to deliver meals, medicines, and other necessities to seniors. So that is in place. In addition, funding, there's a number of funding announcements that was made by the federal government, but I'll allow our colleagues on the call to talk about the federal programs that have been expanded. But we're also looking at supporting domestic violence. We've just recently announced $2.7 million to help during this crisis. We found that there's been actually a recent increase in domestic violence that's been reported to some of our frontline victim service organizations. So the government is providing an emergency payment of $2.7 million to help about 50 community agencies across the province. And this will help with frontline staff, again, being able to respond to help provide some supports, which would include accommodation, meals, and transportation. As well, last week, our Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Minister Tabolo, announced a $12 million additional support, and $2.6 million of that is actually going directly into hiring new psychologists to assist people. We also found that these services are really necessary at this point in time because people are experiencing increased anxiety and stress and other mental health challenges. And the self-isolation is also contributing to that as well. So these resources are going to be there to be able to, again, help people who are going to be supporting on the front line and dealing with some of these difficult realities, every single day. the other funding I shouldn't forget to mention is we've also provided $7.4 million to an Indigenous program to help address serving some of the vulnerable people living off reserve with some housing and supports. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Jane, is there anything you wanted to add?
Hey, thank you, Effie. That was a lot of information there, and great for that. I'll just jump in with a couple of things. So, our office obviously is got a lot of people calling because, as a government, the most responsible thing you do is for vulnerable people. It's your responsibility to make sure that they're taken care of. So Effie also did mention about the region receiving the monies. I think it's $2 million, right? So that anybody that's, already receiving monies, we've had lots of calls from lots of people here in Burlington. They are going through the region to obviously get that extra money that's there. And the region is working, beautifully with us as well, which they always do and will continue to do. So that's been great. There was also $40 million, I'm not sure if Effie mentioned that or not, on Friday, and that's to residential for vulnerable people at home as well. That's an addition on top of what we've already come out to say. But I also wanted to say that as the PA to Labor, we have frozen the rates for WSIB for 5 years for the not-for-profits. So that's about 2,700 that will not receive an increase. So for the Legion, for an example, they would have had a 300% increase with what was going to come out, and now they don't have that. And on top of that, there's 1,600 rates will go down above and beyond the 2,700 because there's 4,600 not-for-profits in Ontario. So I think it's a savings of $148 million for the not-for-profits. So that helps them on the other side of that as well. But, it is exactly what Effie is saying. And when you did talk about the question, Carl, I'll just digress for a minute about commercial for rent. We have had many conversations with people and businesses that are calling here. Again, because everything is so fluid, and you think you cover something and then something else comes up and our offices get calls on it. We constantly have a line of communications open with Minister Clark, with MMAH, talking to him. He's very well aware, and of course, looking into that as well right now. So, we're constant in conversation, with Effie and myself back and forth with each ministry when we're getting calls at the office. We can, best guide them where they can go and the help that they need.
Thank you. Now, we certainly appreciate that, the government has made it clear that everything is on the table, and that what has been announced to date has been focused on providing that immediate relief that is so necessary, and that there are, additional phases of support that may be made available to try to ease the impact on our economy and small businesses at this time. With all of that said, and recognizing that we're managing the crisis and its immediacy and the sense of urgency right now, is there anything happening in terms of conversations about, what the forecast of the long-term impact on Ontario's economy is going to be, and what may be on the table in terms of, stimulus funding or plans to help the economy recover?
So this is Effie, and I can jump in if you like, and then maybe Jane can follow.
Great. Thanks, Effie.
Carla, as you were saying, this really was the first phase of Ontario's plan, and as both the federal government and we have seen almost on a daily or weekly basis, we've had to innovate and augment the programming and the financial assistance that is being offered both to people and our communities and our businesses. So I would say that our targeted measures in the first phase have been very much on dealing with the health crisis, trying to make sure that people that are vulnerable, as in seniors, residences, long-term care, that we're focusing on those people that are most in need. You may know through our original economic statement, when we announced our funding on the healthcare front, it was about $3.3 billion for more healthcare to protect the people of Ontario. And in that number, we also included something like 1,000 acute care hospital beds and 500 critical care beds, along with 70 assessment centers, would be built up over the course of this month. Beyond that, I think as we move forward and the Premier and our government considers other measures around how we actually go about stimulating the economy, you know, we recognize that the lifeblood of Ontario's economy is our small and medium-sized enterprises. And in many ways, they will have been hit the hardest. So we have to really look at the heart of how we then go about in innovating and recreating and creating the kind of environment that our small business is going to need. So I believe that we will look at the areas where we need to be able to provide the greatest impact in supporting our small and medium-sized enterprises. The Premier noted last week that he's really done a shout out to our business community and specifically our manufacturing community. And he's asked them to work with our government to retool so that we can ramp up the production of so many of the PPEs, as Jane was mentioning earlier. And that includes delivering on masks, on face shields, delivering on ventilators. And in fact, one of the orders that was placed with a company called O2 Medical Technologies are going to be working to produce something like 10,000 ventilator units for a Made in Ontario solution. So I believe that going forward, in addition to dealing with the immediate healthcare crisis, I think that you'll see a plan in Ontario that is also going to be focusing on it, really helping our manufacturing base in Ontario really be more innovative, come up with more ingenuity and nimbleness as we look at how we're going to be able to have our economy recover from this, because clearly, you know, phase one was dealing with our health crisis. Phase two has to be dealing with how we then stimulate our economy and get all of our businesses up and running again.
So I just wanted, Effie, thank you so much. I just wanted to jump in because, you know, as we've heard from, you know, the Prime Minister, you've heard from the Premier, you also heard from the Queen yesterday, if you listen to that at 3 o'clock, that we're all in this together. So all of us are in the exact same situation, you know, across the world. So we all are going to be on the same, you know, field when we come out of this. And the most important thing is that, you know, obviously small and medium business are the economic engine of Ontario and every other place that we have out there. So, you know, as Effie said, you know, we're looking at many things that we can do bringing forward, but also, you know, the first thing is just right out of the gate with the 50 million tools for equipment. The reason we had to do that was because of the situation we're in right now. We recognize that we don't have any of those products here, right? So, you know, to say we're held hostage to other places to be able to get it. And so to make sure right out of the gate, the Premier came out with the 50 million to help with that. And people they're jumping on board with that. And it's phenomenal what they're doing, is especially what Effie just said. Just another example is when you look at, you know, hospitality and restaurants, you know, what is it? 800,000 people have been laid off in that sector. I mean, it's sad, that situation. So when you look at that, I mean, it's, you know, when people which we try to, you know, support the places in Burlington for getting food at our office to refuel, talking to people, you know, they brought in the restaurants that they really wanted liquor attached to that. So that was one thing. I know it's not a big thing, but that was one thing they had asked, right? So they could, you know, continue thriving. So we don't have so many of them, you know, that not thriving at this particular point. But, you know, again, we're all going to be in this, we are all in this together, and we're going to have to work together, and people like the Chamber and people that, you know, in the communities are going to be the ones that are going to help us and how we, you know, kickstart this moving forward from, you know, even today on, continuing on.
Mm-hmm. One of the areas that it would be helpful to have some clarification on, Jane, and perhaps you and Effie can speak to this, is the definition of what is essential versus non-essential. We know that list of essential businesses has been further reduced as of Friday's announcements by the Premier, a number of additional restrictions being imposed as of midnight on Saturday. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what's the rationale? How has the government looked at our economy and all of those businesses and ruled in or ruled out certain activities? So, as an example, there were limitations placed on construction activities as of Friday afternoon. Can you just share with us, some of the key things? Because I know in the past you've talked about risk as being one of those most important considerations.
So I think we went from 74 down to 46, and the reason that we did that was because we want to make sure that, the spread stops and the COVID-19 people aren't, continuing to pass that along. So I think when we started out, the Premier always said, so did, other premiers around, that they started out with a list, and of course that was going to be fluid and changing as time went on, considering how we were moving along with the COVID-19. So when you look at down to 46, what they tried to do, which is very difficult to do, is just because, you have, like for an example, you've got somebody that makes glue. We still have to look at the supply chain of those people, because the boxes still need to be glued to the pharmaceutical in to be able to get the product to where it needs to go. So it was going through that list, which the cabinet and the Premier went through line by line to see what was the best avenue to be able to do that. But, again, we still have people calling the office here quite a bit, because as you're saying, I'm a construction worker. What exactly does that mean? Then we have to, lay out to them that if they're residential and they've already got the footings in, they can continue moving forward. If it's a new build, no, they can't. When you're looking at a here, if they're already going and moving forward, that will continue. But if you're just digging the hole in the ground for the parking, that will shut down itself. Anything that's commercial, as you know, is shut down for buildings. But there are people that are calling us. Obviously Landscape Ontario is calling us because they're wondering if they can continue on. We try, we'll saying to them that golf courses are open because they have to maintain the grounds that they have with the skeleton staff. But unless a tree has fallen down on your property and it's a hazard, right now that's not considered an essential service. So these are times for everybody, and we are, even as MPPs, making sure that we're going through the information and reading it fluidly. But there always is going to be a gray area in certain aspects, because sometimes what you might think is not an essential service, because we're not obviously writing down, Carla, every place and everything that needs to be shut down. There is outlines of what can continue staying open and what, does not. I think Ken has a line in here when you're phoning and trying to, what is it, Ken, when you're phoning and trying to make the reasons in the case of why you should be open, pretty much that's not why you should be open if you have to state a case of why ifs all the time. But, because, things have gone, and we're obviously watching the trajectory of where it's going. We had that on Friday with the doctors telling us, if we keep on the path we are, then this is going to be the outcome of where we are. And we don't want to end up in a situation like Spain or Italy. And, we want to make sure that, we get through this. And it's tough times right now. And everybody is feeling it emotionally. People are feeling it in their businesses. So we're all trying, all of us, municipally, provincial, federally, we are all working together as a team to support the people that are around us. And so we're going to continue to do that. There's going to be many things that are going to continue to change. But if anyone has any questions, Carla, if they're, they're wondering about a business, please, again, don't hesitate to call our office at 905-639-7924, because we can definitely guide them along with the questions that they have.
Thanks, Jane. We appreciate that. I believe we have Minister Sarkaria dialing in and on the line now. Minister, are you available? Minister? Okay, we'll try to connect. Effie, do you have any further insights or final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I can just add that I just got a text from the minister, okay, and he says that he is on the line, but he is muted.
Okay, I'm going to ask Shauna to unmute. And for those who are dialing,
he says he says he's muted as an attendee.
Okay, So we're going to unmute everyone that's dialing in. For those who are not going to be speaking, if we could ask you to mute your line manually so that we minimize any feedback while the minister's speaking, that would be appreciated. Minister Sarkaria, are you there? Hello? Effie, while we're trying to resolve this, are there any final thoughts you'd like to add?
The only other piece of information I would like to share, along with what Jane was saying, is that if there are businesses who have questions about these closures, and I know sometimes people have pointed out to us there are some workplaces, like certain construction sites, that were considered at risk. The important thing is that you can actually call an information line, which I'll give you the number of, and that will give you additional will help answer any questions you have, or if you've got anything you want to report, like an workplace. And that number is 1-888-444-3659. 1-888-444-3659.
Thank you so much. And we'll be sure to add all of these numbers to the Team Burlington landing page, which everyone on the line and businesses across the city can access by going to the Burlington Chamber's website. Minister, are you on the line? We're working hard to make sure that everyone is unmuted. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, well, perhaps at this point in time, because we do have a number of our federal representatives, apologies that we haven't been able to unlock our Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction at provincial level. We do have a number of individuals on the line from the federal government. Anita, I'm going to ask you to make some initial intros, and we'll continue to work on this other technical issue.
Great, thanks, Carla. So good morning, everyone. I'm Anita Cassidy, Executive Director of Burlington Economic Development. So we're going to shift gears into the federal component now, and once we've sorted out everything with Minister Sarkaria, we'll go back to him and ask him. So from the federal level here today with us, we have our two local MPs, MP Karina Gould, who is the hey, Karina, who is our local MP for Burlington, and also the Minister of International Development, as well as MP Damoff, who is the MP for Oakville, North Burlington. And I believe joining us on the line as well, we have the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, Mélanie. So if we have Minister Joly on the line, she's got a limited amount of time today, so we're going to ask her to provide a little bit of a high-level overview of what is being done by the federal government to support businesses through COVID-19. Minister Joly? We seem to be having issues getting ministers to speak today. Apologies. Did one of our other MPs want to provide a high-level overview instead? I see you nodding, Karina.
Yeah, sure. So hopefully Minister Joly will be able to share soon, because I know she's been working so hard with our colleagues in the economic on the economic files, as well with Minister Ng of Small Business and Minister Morneau of Finance. But you know, we've done a number of things. I mean, the first one was the $40,000 loan for small businesses to help with operating costs. That is very, very important. That is being worked through BDC and EDC. My understanding is that if you're a small business, we do encourage you to go first speak with your bank about that, and then they will refer you to BDC. The other thing that we are working on is the wage subsidy program, which will be up to 75% of salaries, up to $58,000 a year. We're recalling Parliament this week to try and get that underway. We have provided a number of $500 billion worth of liquidity into the market here in Canada. We're very committed to making sure that supply chains can come forward. And I know that the last questions that were being asked were about essential businesses. And just this week, or last week, sorry, it's Monday today, all the days seem the same these days, to me at least. We put out late last week our list of essential services and businesses at the federal level, and this was put together by our emergency management planning teams and public safety to really ensure that we're looking at what is essential in a time of crisis. And so, I mean, food services, agriculture, specific things with regards to infrastructure and public transit, public safety, and supply chains to make sure that we can get and produce medical goods and get those items to people as are needed are on that list. You can see it, it's on my website, but you can also just Google it. It's also on the Government of Canada's list. And so we've really tried to deal with both the two big costs that businesses faced with regards to operating costs, but also with regards to wage subsidies. And so we've heard loud and clear from a number of you about both of those two items. And then for people who aren't able to keep their employees on payroll, we've also put the Canada Emergency Response Benefit into online, which actually comes online today for folks to get them through this time period. So I think that's kind of a broad overview of some of the things that we've done, but hopefully Mélanie can come and talk about a little bit more. Otherwise, both Pam and I are here to answer some more questions.
Great, thank you, Karina. I'll just do a check-in again to see if we've got Minister Joly on the line.
And discount on their car insurance bills for April, May.
Nope, don't hear anything. So maybe we'll skip down to the questions that we had for Karina and Pam, Carla, and we can come back to the questions for Minister Joly.
Yeah, would it be possible for us to take a deeper dive into the 75% wage subsidy? We're receiving so many questions about it, about the criteria for eligibility. Could we touch on that in a bit more depth? I know that it's of great interest to so many who are attending and participating. Karina or Pam, perhaps we could ask you to weigh in.
Yeah, sure. So on the wage subsidy, so this will be it for both for-profit and not-for-profit, but we're still working through a number of the details. So, I mean, one of the things that I would ask people for, and I know it's really hard, is to, I just got a text from Pam saying she's on, but I think people who phoned in are having trouble speaking. Is that we're asking for folks for a little bit of patience, because this is, an extraordinary time that we're in and an unprecedented situation. And we also have to bring in new legislation to do this, right? And so just like with the CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, it took us a couple of weeks to go from design, legislation to implementation and coming online. And we're going to be in a similar space with the wage subsidy. And, as the Prime Minister has said time and time again, we are in a space where, we're analyzing, we're responding, and we're readjusting as necessary. And so, we're trying to call Parliament back this week to get it through the House. We're working with the opposition parties to do that. And there will be more details coming available. And one of the things that I've been talking to Minister Ng about is working through the chamber networks to make sure that as soon as that information is available, we're sending it through the chamber so that you have the information as needed. I'm just pulling up the eligibility criteria. So it's for both for-profit and not-for-profit businesses. My understanding is that it will be based on your previous year's revenue, and it will require to see a decline in revenue over the past 3 months to be eligible for it. I think the details, oh, there's Pam. Oh, good, there she is. Are still being ironed out, but that's my understanding as of right now. But we'll be sure to get those details to you as soon as they are available and exactly how to apply for it. Ultimately, what we want to see is we want to see employers being able to retain their employees as much as possible, so that when we get through this storm, we'll be able to ramp up you know, and rev up our economic engine and get right back to things, recognizing that, you know, things are going to be changing, you know, so much. But that's really the goal for the wage subsidy program. But again, we're still ironing out all of those exact details. Is there anything you want to add to that, Pam?
Well, I was here and then, but I couldn't speak, so I'm glad I got added in there. Yeah, and I think it's also important to know that the government is listening and responding to concerns we're hearing from folks like the chamber. I know I've heard similar concerns from both Oakville and Burlington chambers about the wage subsidy, and so as a result of your advocacy and your members, somebody else is talking right now.
Oh, there's Mel.
But we did respond and increased it from 10% to 75%. So, you know, if there's issues that you're seeing in our programs, please let Karina and I know, because we can share that. And the government has been responsive to the concerns that we're hearing from you. And you've been great in letting us know what you're hearing from businesses, Carla. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for that. And one of the things we're looking forward to is hearing if there are some additional relief mechanisms that could be provided to startups or those businesses that are scaling up that may have a difficult time being able to demonstrate that 30% reduction over last year. So I see that we have the minister on the line. We're very excited you're joining us.
Hi.
Thank you for making time in your calendar. We'd love to have you join the conversation and discussion. So
Thank you. I had problems joining you. I could see all of you. I could hear the great work and the wise words of Karina and Pam, but it's as if I was not able to you couldn't hear me. So anyways, so Karina outlined a lot of the different measures. Where do you want me to start? And I can just take questions also.
Well, perhaps you could provide us with a bit of a high-level overview of some of the things that you're hearing, some of the things that you're looking at to support the business community. That would be really welcome. And today we've been focusing on, you know, understanding, you know, the most immediate needs that the government is looking at and the myriad of supports that have been offered to date, but also to what is this going to look like from a recovery perspective? It's very hard for us to predict what the long-term and the full scope of the economic impact is, but you know, people are starting to think about, you know, longer term. How are we going to rev the economy back up, as Karina's just mentioned?
Yes. Well, I think that at the beginning, the reading of the government regarding the crisis in terms of the economic issue was really about the fact that there would be how can I say that the demand would be moving, that maybe a furniture company would not be selling furniture for 2-3 months, but then afterwards, in the you know, during the summer months, that would be the case, and therefore we needed to really support the liquidity crunch of that company as we go through it. And certain sectors were also more impacted than others. Definitely, the tourism sector was way more impacted than others, and for example, for example, the energy sector also in Alberta and the West. But what happened is bit by bit, as the Ford government came up with many more stringent measures, well, we're seeing that, you know, all non-essential businesses are impacted. So what we wanted to do was to make sure that our biggest economic measure was to make sure that people would be following the rules and flattening that curve. That's our economic plan. That's the most important thing, because that way we can make sure that people that we can, you know, reboot the economy as fast as possible while we contain the spread of the virus. Then we expanded massively the social safety net. Karina talked to you about it, and that's a famous CERB, the $2,000 per month, and that's starting, you know, people can apply starting today. And then the economic measures she was talking to you about. And so we're still in stabilization mode. And we know that, well, we came up very fast with new measures. There's 80% pretty much of people and businesses that are covered. But to your point about startups, there's still 20% of cases that we need to deal with. Startups being one of them, new businesses being another one. So for the new businesses since that were started in February, the Minister of Finance has already said we'll go case by case basis, because obviously they can't show that there's a 30% loss. So we know that startups, we know that new businesses, we know, for example, seasonal businesses also are impacted, and also there, you know, the tech sector is different, because if you're a company that is really increasing its revenues very fast, so well, that's something that we have to take into account. So all weekend we've been working on trying to find that 20% of cases and dealing with it. And so I'm confident we'll be able to do this week.
Thank you so much. We're also hearing about mid-sized businesses as well. Are there other supports that are being contemplated for mid-sized businesses as well, to parallel some of the things that are being done to address the immediate and urgent concerns of the smaller business?
When you say mid-size, you mean $1 million of wage?
Yeah, well, usually we rely on the definition of, you know, 100 or fewer employees for small, and then we've got that, you know, 101 to 490.
Yeah.
I know we've been hearing that, you know, there's a desperate need for some relief as well. Are you looking at the differences between those, you know, different business complements and how we can support them as well during this time?
Well, the idea with the wage subsidy was definitely to make sure we could support small businesses, but also medium-sized businesses. So I think the most important thing is that they can fall into the, you know, they can have access to that wage subsidy. And if that's not the case, well, you know, it would be great to be working with you, with Karina and Pam also, to identify these cases, because the idea of the government the intent of our government is definitely to make sure that that wage subsidy applies, because that will be better for the recovery afterwards. It's the best way to reboot the economy afterwards, because people, businesses have kept their employees. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is definitely we've made sure through the BDC to have access to a lot of liquidity. We've taken more risks on our shoulders. The federal government has decided to take more risk on our shoulders, and we're really pushing banks and the BDC to provide the right liquidity and therefore to take more risks. So we really hope that that's the case. If that's not the case, please let us know. Karina, Pam, and I can make sure that we do the right follow-up. The 6 CEOs of the chartered banks have already said that they would be taking more risks, looking at mortgage deferrals, mortgage repayment deferrals, or lowering interest rates. But is that happening in Burlington? Is that happening in, you know, is the branch manager in Burlington doing it? That's what we need to know. So
yes, and we certainly appreciate how responsive both Karina's and Pam's office have been. You know, the communication has been tremendously helpful, and the receptivity to listening to the concerns of our business community is something that we're all very, very grateful for.
And that's why
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and also, you know, there's no roadmap for what we're doing. This is unprecedented. So, you know, I think the government has done an amazing job in trying to respond to both people who've lost their jobs with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and to businesses. But quite frankly, it's not like this is a system that we're putting in place that's been around before. So if there are gaps, we need to hear from you. And Carla, you've been great, and everybody on Team Burlington has been great about letting us know. But you know, we need to hear that, because there is no roadmap for what we're doing right now, and we're trying to respond first of all quickly to the most urgent needs first, and then looking at where there might be gaps, and then, you know, in terms of longer term and recovery, all of that is part of what we're going to be looking at. But right now there's urgent needs that we need to address, and that's certainly been the priority.
You know, and
Carla?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yes.
No, but you mentioned about what the recovery would be looking like. Definitely, we're looking at scenarios. Obviously, we're having conversation as to what could be done, but we're still, you know, in the stabilization part of what we're doing. We know that the wage subsidy issue is not finalized. It's not perfect, and that's why we need to get it right. Well, the Minister of Finance will be going before Parliament this week. And so that's why this is our priority right now. And we've tried to go as broad as possible. There are also certain specific sectors that we're looking at that are more impacted than others. I talked about the tourism sector. That's definitely the sector we're looking at. And therefore, afterwards, obviously, we'll be looking at stimulus package. But we need to bear in mind that what other countries the Asian countries are doing right now is, while their economy is rebooting, we have to bear in mind that there may be surges of the virus.
Absolutely.
So that's why we have to work with the Ontario government to see how they will eventually loosen up the containment measures and to adapt their economy, and therefore come up with a good stimulus package.
And I think your point is very well taken, the one that you made at the outset, that it's really important that we level the plank. We need to starve the virus, and the more we can do that by self-isolating, practicing physical distancing, as painful and difficult as it is for our economy now, the more we adhere to that, the sooner we'll be able to get back to a state of normalcy. So I thank you for that comment. It's not lost. I know this is, you know, an incredibly difficult time for so many, and it is, to Pam's point, uncharted, unprecedented. There's no playbook here, but you know, again, practicing some of those best practices to keep us all healthy and safe is a really important part of the strategy. So, Anita, were there any questions you wanted to chime in with?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd asked this question at the provincial level, but we did want to pose it at the federal level as well, in terms of specific supports that you're applying at the federal level that we should make businesses aware of for retooling, and how they can find out about what those needs are and what supports we can specifically give businesses to figure out how to re-engineer their lines, how to understand the components, how to get the new staff trained or new staff that they'll need to complete these types of requests for our federal and provincial counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, Karina mentioned it at the beginning. It's the wage subsidy, because it's 75% of all, you know, wages up to $58,700. That's per person. That's really, really important, because right now, what we're trying to do is to help businesses have access to liquidity, but also reduce their burn rate. And the wage subsidy is a way for many businesses to reduce their burn rate. Now, we know that, for example, in the service sector, wages are one of the biggest expenses. But in the manufacturing sector, fixed cost bit can be leases or equipment, which is a different issue. We're getting there. This is something we're looking at. But also, we know that, for example, rent or mortgages are certainly an issue. We hope that the province can do something about reducing also the burden of fixed costs for businesses. For mortgages, well, I think what businesses could be doing or should be doing is call their banks and say, hey, you know, can I defer my payments on my mortgage on certain equipment? And, you know, usually that should be happening. If that's not the case, to my point to Carla, we should know. You know, the government needs to have good conversations with banks when that's not happening. Also, for smaller businesses, there's a loan of $40,000, and that $40,000 loan is for smaller businesses between 50 and 50,000 and $1 million of wage. And the good news about that is if businesses are able to pay back that 40,000 loan, well, they can keep 10,000. So it becomes a subsidy for $10,000. So the idea is to pay it back within 2 years. The other thing is to reduce the burn rate was really tax deferral. So payment to GST, you know, deduction at source, everything in line with what is owed to the government is pretty much deferred in time. And so that's a good way to keep money in businesses' pockets. And for the rest, I think that what we've done is to invest massively with the BDC and EDC. So, you know, go to BDC, go to EDC. If you don't have access to these institutions because there's an issue, well, please contact Karina, please contact Pam. I'm in charge of FedDev, which is the regional economic agency that is definitely present in your neck of the woods in Burlington. And we can definitely help also, you know, liaise with different businesses, but also to help them triage all the information. And so that's another way also through the FedDev, you know, the FedDev Regional Development Agency.
And Anita, just on so thank you, Mel. That was like a super overview of what we're doing. I'm so glad you're on the call. On retooling for supplying, you know, the provincial and federal government with regards to domestic capacity, we've put $2 billion into a fund through economic development. So through the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Ministry, right, to get businesses producing the masks and the PPE and all of the stuff that our, you know, our medical folks on the front lines need. I put in the chat box the link to the buyandsell.gc.ca website. So if companies are interested and have the capacity to retool, they can go onto that website. Also, if you're local, which I assume you are if you're on the chamber, email Pam or I, and we can put you in touch with Anita and Nav, who are the ministers that are kind of working on this. And we've already had some success stories locally. So for example, Burloak Technologies, that is technically in Oakville now, but was in Burlington. You know, they're going to be producing face masks. So, you know, and Thornhill Medical, which is producing respirators. You know, there's a whole bunch of companies that are shifting what they're doing. So don't hesitate to reach out to us directly, and we'll put you in touch with the folks that need it, or simply go on to the Buy and Sell website, because the federal government is triaging all of these requests and assessing which companies you know, have the capacity to make those changes and can tool up quickly.
If I can add to that, thank you. What we've asked FedDev to help out also is to do 3 things for retooling. The first one is proactively identify companies that are manufacturing these PPE equipment. The second thing is help retooling, and either through, like Karina said, through the basically the website, or also sometimes if they know FedDev, well, we can support them through expertise and funding for retooling. And my last point, which is something that is not always discussed, but that can be a solution, is for businesses that actually have these PPE equipment, but are not, you know, are not necessarily in operation right now, and they don't need that equipment. Please, 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 please identify yourselves, because, you know, we can use that equipment frontline workers need that equipment. There's no need necessarily for your team to get it if you're not in operations. There's a dire need, so therefore we are working with FedDev to identify these companies as well.
Great, thank you. And I know Premier Ford has made remarks around the need to bring back the international elements of our supply chain kind of long-term and not put ourselves in this situation again as an economy in Ontario. Has there been any consideration given to those types of discussions at the federal level?
Well, we've always been extremely integrated to the US supply chain. That's the reality of Canada, and that's definitely the reality of Ontario. And that has been a strength of the country. And so obviously we want to make sure that we keep our supply chain strong. We need to make sure that we have access to the American market. And that's why we negotiated before all this, the new NAFTA. But indeed, we need to make sure that we prepare for pandemics. We never thought during our lifetime that we would be going through this. You didn't, I didn't, you know, this is an unforeseen event. But I think there will be a lot of conclusions that will be drawn from this experience. And I think that we will have to look at ways to make sure we have, you know, better access and better preparation for these types of supply going forward.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you're already seeing some Canadian companies doing that retooling to manufacture some of this, and also I want to give a bit of a shout out to the companies here in Burlington that are already donating, like Habitat for Humanity that has donated their N95 masks that they're not using right now. So these things are happening, and you know, we're encouraging more companies to do that, and you know, we really are seeing Canadian companies and individuals, quite frankly, stepping up to go above and beyond what maybe they thought they were able to do in helping others in times of crisis.
I just got a question from a participant as well. If you could just clarify where exactly one would go for the 40,000 loan, and we can pop that in the side chat. And just so everyone's aware as well, we've got a little chat function. If you click chat on Zoom, we've been posting a whole bunch of links and email addresses as we go along throughout this.
It's through their bank, so it's through the banking system. So it's really if they work usually with a chartered bank, please go ahead, talk to your banker. I think businesses right now should have, yes, find out the information online that we're sending them. You guys are fundamental to make sure to provide that information. Never before, I think, the chambers of commerce across this country have been so key to supporting their businesses all across the country. But I think having a good conversation with your accountant and with your banker is fundamental while people are taking these decisions.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly any and all of the links and resources that are being shared on the chat function of today's video conference are already on our Team Burlington landing page at the Chamber's website. And if there are any new or additional resources, we are keeping the website up to date in real time as announcements are being made, as successive waves of relief measures are being offered, to ensure that we can provide that one-stop shop for support and resources in the community. So, and we appreciate your support and encouragement and all the information that's being shared with the Chamber network locally and across the country. It's playing a really important role in terms of informing the business community.
And so before being in business, before being in politics, I was in business, and I was in charge of a communications firm. And I understand the frustration right now of certain businesses that are asking for more certainty, because when you're in business, you want certainty. It makes sense because you're dealing with risks. What I can tell you is what Karina, Pam, and I, and the Minister of Finance are doing, and the Prime Minister obviously is really providing that certainty as fast as we can. That's why having conversations like we're having, identifying the cases that are maybe falling into the cracks is really fundamental to us, because we want to go as fast as we can to provide that certainty while knowing that we're not perfect because we're dealing with an imperfect situation. So that's why thank you for your work. This is really, really helpful.
Thank you. And I know you have to step away, Minister Joly. Were there any final thoughts or programs that you wanted to highlight for our businesses out there?
Well, at the end of the day, the economy is always based a lot on confidence, consumer confidence, on the fact that people are able to invest in the future. It's a lot about dealing with, confidence, emotions. And I think that the best way to go through this really difficult period, well, a lot of people are anxious, is really to trust that the future will be bright, and that we need to make sure that we hold on to our really good businesses, that the government has your back. We're working to make sure that you have options on the table, and at the end of the day, things will go better afterwards, and your investments in your businesses will be protected, and you'll be able to, we'll be able to be on the other side of the bridge, and things will be better. So it's all about having the right attitude, making sure that we're pulling ourselves together and making sure that we provide the information and that this conversation continues. Pam and Karina are fantastic MPs, great minister also, a very strong voice within our caucus. And so we work together in a very collaborative way, and you can be extremely proud of having them representing you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I have to say, from a personal note, I moved here from the UK, and most of my family is still in the UK, and I am very glad that I live in Canada, where we're taking a very scientific and collaborative approach on this at all levels. It makes me feel very proud to be a Canadian now.
We're very proud of having you. Thank you. Okay, bye everybody.
Thank you,
Bye, Mélanie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So wonderful to have had the minister join us today. Can we ask a couple of additional questions that we've been receiving pretty regularly? As you both know, we have a lot of not-for-profit as well as charities who are members of the chamber and who are relying very heavily on Team Burlington at this time. Are there additional measures that are being contemplated to support those organizations, recognizing that right now, with so many dealing with crisis, that demand for their services and supports is increasing exponentially? So maybe you could just touch on a little bit about some of the other things that are being considered beyond what has already been mirrored for not-for-profits to align with business relief.
Sure, and I'll start, and then maybe Karina wants to jump in as well. But we recognize, and I know when I've been talking to groups like the United Way and Savas and Halton Women's Place and others, that the demand for their services and the food banks, quite frankly, has gone through the roof. Their service delivery model has changed to something they've never thought they'd have to do, and their ability to fundraise has also been challenged. So certainly we've already announced a number of measures, one of which was that the wage subsidy will apply to not-for-profits and charities. That was something I heard from Goodwill. They're still in operation. They're still helping people find work. But they're having challenges in their service delivery. So we're providing $9 million to United Way that will go through to United Way Halton Hamilton to provide assist seniors to get food. $7.5 million to Kids Help Phone, who've just been inundated with kids who are calling them. $50 million that are going to women's shelters and sexual assault lines. $157 million to initiatives to assist homeless people who are homeless. But longer term, we know that charities and not-for-profits are going to be facing additional challenges. Much like we've done with business, our first priority is to get the help and the funding out to the organizations that are on the ground delivering emergency relief. We know that this is not a short-term issue for not-for-profits and charities, so it is something that we're looking at. I can't begin to tell you what that's going to look like, but we are aware that over the next year, not-for-profits and charities will be facing challenges that they've never faced before. But our first priority right now is to be able to allow seniors to get food delivered to their homes, kids to get the help that they need, women who are facing violence and increased human trafficking can get the supports that they need. All of those things, we need to do that on an emergency basis, and I think you know, we're stepping up on a regular basis to try and get that out as quickly as possible as well, through systems that are already in place to get it out and out into the community as quick as possible.
Great. Terrific. Thank you for that. We've also had a question about companies that are essential businesses that rely on workers who are coming from around the globe. Can you touch on a little bit about, you know, what the supports the government is going to put in place for those who may rely upon an international workforce complement?
And we did hear from businesses who expressed that concern quite early on. In fact, mostly I heard from those in the agricultural sector. And we are allowing them to come in. They will have to quarantine for 2 weeks, but the government recognizes that without those workers, our agricultural sector they just can't manage. You may have heard yesterday as well, the Prime Minister mentioned that we're looking at ways to try and find work for students through that, but certainly for essential workers, the government is working with companies and with sectors to make sure that they can get the workforce that they need into Canada, recognizing that we still need to keep Canadians healthy and safe, and so the mandatory quarantine is in effect when those workers get to Canada.
Thank you. I think we have Minister Sarkaria on the line now. Minister, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. We can hear you. Apologies.
Perfect. My apologies for the difficulties as well. As we get used to the new technology, it's a learning experience for all of us, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, we're delighted to have you, and thank you for your patience. Would you like to make any comments or remarks? I know you were listening in for a period of time there. I'm sure that those who are joining us would love to hear from you.
Of course, you know, I'll just share a lot of what I know we've had the opportunity through listening to some of the conversation that was going on. There's been a lot of discussion around just, you know, what a different type of scenario. There's really no playbook for, you know, a scenario like what we are experiencing today. So one of the key points that I think all levels of government are really working towards, and our government really want to work forward with, is the ability for all of us to have open lines of communication more so than ever. I've got to say the chambers across this province, through my discussions and just my ability to read different regions, different cities, different areas, the chambers have been such an incredible voice for us to really frame a lot of what we are doing as a government. So I really want to take the opportunity to thank all of you for the great work that you are doing individually within your own cities and across the province. It's been very helpful for us. And given the nature of what we're really in right now with COVID, we've really got to be able to you know, governments really wants to step up to the plate and really support our small businesses, not just through these couple of weeks, but then how are we going to help rebuild, and how are we going to help overcome many of the challenges that some of our businesses are facing. I know that my colleagues, both NBP Effie as well as NBP Mckenna, probably had the opportunity to discuss in some detail of what our government launched a couple of weeks ago for some interim relief for businesses. But I think that's just very important for us to be able to say that it's just the start. There's going to be, as the situation evolves, as we progress, we really want to have the opportunity to listen to businesses and get their input on how government can best help and support. So the first package of about $10 billion for Ontario businesses was released a couple of weeks ago, whether it's deferments for provincial taxes, WSIB payments, and potentially property taxes as well. Those were just the start, but I think now more than ever, it's important for us to work together as within our different stakeholders, different economic partners, and different levels of government to really get Ontario and this country back on track. And, you know, it's really important. I understand, you know, we've had to make some very tough decisions on the essential services list, you know, with many businesses are facing a lot of hardships. They're having to close. But I think it's really important for us to understand that, you know, in order to get back to normal, we've really got to focus on fixing this health crisis, this pandemic, and we need governments to really focus on securing the isolation, the quarantining, and making sure we follow the strict guidelines put out by our public health officials and chief medical officers in Ontario. So if we can weather the storm together, I know we'll get out of it stronger. We're going to come out of it stronger, and the government of Ontario and Premier Ford want to be there to support our businesses. So now more than ever, it's important for us to have these discussions. I know my colleagues have been very involved, and so we want to hear more from businesses on how in our next steps we can better support them and get them back on their feet and working even better.
Great, thank you, Minister Sarkaria. And we'd asked this question of our local MPPs, but perhaps you could dig into this in a little more detail. Obviously, Premier Ford had released the numbers at the weekend, and we're going to have to see some strict measures in terms of Ontario, as we've already reduced the number of essential businesses. Have you started looking at any economic modeling in terms of long-term and short-term economic impacts and recovery?
I think, you know, there's discussions have been going on where the government's continuously working with all levels, you know, different individuals in the industry to understand where the pinpoints, where the biggest impacts are going to be. And the situation as it is today is it's literally changing by the day, by the hour, by the minute, and it's very hard for us to be able to predict. The modeling is only as good as the assumptions that underlie the model. So it has been a bit difficult for us, given what the numbers that you know, we've seen that we, you know, declared publicly last week on Friday. It shows that for a good portion of April, that until we get this under control, we're going to be under these very strict measures. So there's obviously going to be some very big impacts economically given this, but we've got to do whatever we can from a health standpoint to prevent that from getting even worse. So we want to focus really and ensure that, you know, in the short term, you know, if we can tackle this virus, you know, the doctors at that press conference were very, you know, we're very strong with their guidance and their support in telling us that if we can, you know, control this now, there's less chances of a secondary or tertiary wave coming as well. And if we want to look at a strong economic recovery, we've got to make sure that we take all the steps we can in the short term to ensure a stronger long-term economic recovery process. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer to that question, but it's just given the volatility, the changing circumstances, what's going on across the world. It's not just a Canadian problem. It's, you know, look at the U.S., you look at internationally. This has really brought the world's economy to a halt to a certain extent, and we're going to have to really examine it and work together across our province to get through this.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm just going to cut back to our federal MPs that we have on the line here, because I know they have a hard stop, to ask if they'd like to make any final closing remarks before a couple of final questions that we have for the provincial level. We have Minister Sarkaria on the line.
No problem. Perfect.
Karina, you can go ahead if you like. Oh, do you?
Thanks. I just wanted to really emphasize Minister Joly's points around the fact that the federal government really is putting all tools on the table to deal with what is a really unprecedented situation. I also wanted to reinforce the point that she made about if you are looking to get access to that loan, to contact your local bank. You know, we've obviously been having conversations at the federal level with the bank management, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the branch managers and the commercial account managers who are the ones that are going to be face-to-face with you. If you are having trouble, don't hesitate to reach out to Pam or I, and we can feed that information back up through the system, because, you know, not everybody knows what's going on the ground, even if, you know, the CEO of a bank has committed to doing something. So that is really important for us to know. I also wanted to highlight the Hst Deferral. That's very important for small businesses in particular. And, you know, it was something that both Pam and I heard from you and advocated to the federal government. So very pleased to see that, you know, you raising that issue, us bringing it forward, resulted in action. So, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You know, we're both on your team and we're very much working for you and want to be with you and want to see you be successful through this, right? You know, it's really, really tough for you. We understand that, and ultimately we want to see you not only survive, but ultimately thrive. There was a question in regards to, you know, recovery. And, you know, Minister Joly highlighted this point, but I think it's really important to emphasize we are still very much in the reaction phase. I wouldn't even go so far as to say we're in the stabilization phase, because we are still very much reacting to a new reality that we're hoping to get to stabilization before we can get to recovery. And the other thing that I just wanted to clarify, and I don't mean to be, you know, doom and gloom here, but I think it's important that we understand this, that when we talk about planking the curve, we're talking about flattening it. Right? That still means that we have a health crisis going on, right? So we're at a point right now, and we've seen around the world, you know, and we have the benefit of being 2 to 3 weeks behind what's going on in Europe and hopefully what's going on in the United States. And so we took social isolation measures much faster than our peer countries, right? We closed the border when we had a limited amount of cases. We implemented social distancing. We closed down essential services. And so we're hoping that those measures are going to enable us to contain the spread of the virus and ultimately to save human life, right? We're doing this because we want to save lives. That's the bottom line here. And we recognize that that has a huge, huge consequence for our economy. But at the end of the day, it's because we want to save people's lives and we want to ensure that our healthcare system can manage the burden of an increased demand. And so planking the curve means that we get to a point where we have the same number of new cases each day so that our healthcare system can manage, right? And can manage the influx in cases. But that still means that we're going to be at a level of the curve planked for a few days before we start to see a decrease, right? And so when you think about what's going on in Europe right now, in Italy or Spain, by the time they saw a leveling off of new cases, they were still in a health emergency, right? And so as you start to see the decline, you can't start to talk about loosening social distancing measures until you start to see that decline. And then you have to think very carefully about what that looks like so that, as Mélanie said, we don't see a secondary peak, right? Because that's what they're seeing in Singapore, in China right now. And so we have to be very conscious of that. And, you know, I'm just putting it out there just to get a sense of, you know, what the magnitude of the crisis is that we're dealing with. But all that being said, what we're seeing right now in Canada is, that we're on a better trajectory than some of our peer countries, but we're not out of the woods yet. And so, really, I think as the Prime Minister has been trying to highlight and to state, like, this is a whole of country effort, right? Whether you're not for profit, whether you're a business, and as individuals, we all have a role to play to ensure that we can to plank the curve and then to ultimately see a decrease. And so I know this is really hard. I know this is really difficult, and we will continue to listen to what the issues are that you're facing, to advocate, to make sure that we're filling those gaps. And I think, Mélanie's point about that 20% of the economy that, doesn't quite see themselves reflected in the initiatives, we are going to constantly be readjusting so that we can have the most effective response possible. But we can only do that through dialogue. And so events like this that the Chamber and BDC are putting on are incredibly important for us. We'll look forward to getting your feedback and your questions and comments, and we'll do our best to respond in a timely manner. And of course, keep in touch with Pam and I, because, I won't speak for myself, but Pam is an amazing advocate, and I've seen firsthand what she's been able to do. So are
you, Karina.
Thanks. I feel a little weird saying that about myself, though. We will continue to work hard to make sure you get the support that you need, because we're going to count on you when things get back to the new normal, whatever that looks like, to make sure that we can get our economy back on track. So unfortunately, I have a bit of a hard stop, and I have to get going to a few other calls that I have, but I will look forward to the feedback and to the responses from this, and I leave you in Pam's very capable hands, and just really want to thank everyone at the Chamber and BDC for putting this on, for having us on the call, and everyone for participating, and for all of you putting your efforts in to make sure that we can do our best to what is at the end of the day about saving lives here in Canada. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being on the line, Karina. We really appreciate it, all that you and the government are doing.
So I'll just be brief to add on to what Karina said, and I think the Team Burlington approach is something, quite frankly, Karina and I have taken since we first got elected in 2015, and those networks and the partnerships that we've built over the last 5 years have really paid off now that we are seeing this crisis, and working with yourselves. I also think we have never, ever, in my lifetime, seen so many levels of government, business, individuals working together for the common good. Any kind of partisanship has been set aside, and we're all working towards the same goal, which is to help Canadians. And so I think everyone appreciates that, and appreciates the hard work being done by everyone. I also want to just highlight, Mélanie was talking about some of the sectors hardest hit. I also want to recognize the restaurants and bars. Restaurants and bars have been some of the hardest hit by what's going on, and also were hit very early on. So we certainly do see that, and we recognize it. Echoing Karina's thanks to the Team Burlington that has brought this forum together, and I am doing regular updates from my office, so if you are in North Burlington and you want to sign up, you can go to my website at mpdamoff.ca, and there's a button. We've been doing them daily since this started. That may change. We're not doing them for the sake of doing them, we're just doing them to make sure that we can get information out. And I'm going to, most of you may know or may not know, Terry Fox is quite a hero of mine, and when he was asked what he thought before he went to sleep every night when he was on the Marathon of Hope, he said, "I try not to worry, and I just think about putting one foot in front of the other." And I think that's what I will leave you with is, let's just put one foot in front of the other and get through this together.
Great. Thank you so much, Karina and Pam.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we'll move back to a final question at the official level for Minister Sarkaria, and then we'll ask perhaps Jane to step in on that one as well and offer final thoughts. So something that we've been hearing from quite frequently for businesses, those essential businesses in the food production and in the manufacturing sector, that they need to stay open, are, guidance on health and safety. Is the province considering putting together any specific health and safety guidance in light of COVID-19 for these businesses? And are there some existing resources around that can provide them with practical information?
Yeah, of course. I think from Ministry of Labor and Training and Skills, there has been some practice outlines or best practices outlines that have been shared through the ministry website. But the government completely would expect the businesses to require with the elements of social distancing within their places of business. And we've seen businesses and suggested that businesses stagger their lunches, stagger their breaks. And we've seen, the business community really step up to the plate and really take these measures seriously. And I think that's something that should be recognized. We've seen some of the retail stores put up plexiglasses as well to keep their employees safe. So I think, where there's more support or there's more guidance needed, we'd be more than happy to facilitate that through the Ministry of Labor. And I know that Jane has been really working hard on that as well, and even both with Effie as well. So more than happy to help out if there's any further guidance needed on that. But there's very strict compliance from labor inspectors right now with any businesses that are operating to comply with many of these public health guidelines that have been put forward by the government, and more than happy to clarify if there's any issues offline through our government or through the ministry.
Great. Jane, did you want to add to that from your role with the Ministry of Labor?
Yes, thanks so much. There's just a couple things I just want to jump in and say is that the Premier did say last week, with the bad actors that are out there, so the inspectors are still continuing daily to go out at the Ministry of Labor. So fire construction companies were shut down. So we are continuing to be very aggressive for that. And also I did say the business lines to contact was 1-888-444-3659. And for the employees, they can contact the employment standards information again is 1-800-531-5551. Everybody wants to comply. People want to go to work safe, but they want to make sure that when they are there, the employers and the employees are working together hand in hand to make sure that they are all doing the right thing. So I just jump in and just before we close off, because listen, I want to say what was great about today, because there were a couple things mentioned by Minister Gould and also Minister Joly. So I just want to jump in and reiterate on that, because we've had some calls here. I'll just go with Minister Gould first. We've had some calls here from local businesses about the $40,000 loan that they can get. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is that the banks have told us, and it's actually on their websites, that the Canadian Emergency Business Account, the government is who guarantees that, not the banks. So they are, just so everyone's clear, the banks don't have the ability to process applications at the branch or through the call center. The application is only available online for COVID-19 website. So just so everyone's clear, because people, when they are very nervous and trying to get $1,000, have been quite concerned that, they have phoned over to the banks. I'll just use BMO as an example. And they're telling them exactly that, right? That it is the government that guarantees the loan up to $40,000. So you can only get it online, the application, which is that COVID-19 website. Then the next thing I just wanted to quickly jump in and say, with the further to the Minister Joly's comments regarding the PPE and the other essential items, is that, we need to continue to triage this, right, to Ontario, because the Minister of Health obviously is on the front lines with all the PPE and the equipment that's coming in. And it is such a priority that we have PPE for Ontario and across the country. So again, 3 levels of government all working hand in hand. And it was just great to be part of this conversation today, because just those two jumped out at me right away, because we all think we're trying to do our best to communicate. But again, we are in such uncharted waters that we're, going hour by hour, which we have said numerous times. But that would just be great, because I saw someone pop up a question up there about Joe Brand Hospital with PPE. So just to make sure those lines are communicated and triaged over to the Ministry of Health, so we have, one direct source of where that's going.
Great, thank you, Jane. I'm just going to skip back to Minister Sarkaria because I know he has to get off the line. So are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share or programs that you'd like to highlight, Minister?
I think, yeah, just in closing, you know, we recognize the very tough situation that many of our businesses are in right now. We want to make sure that they, you know, maintain the same character coming out of this crisis that they had going in, and that it's not just about supporting small businesses businesses through this crisis, but really helping them rebuild afterwards as well. So we know you've sacrificed so much to make your dreams a reality, and the success of our businesses is really the success of Ontario's economy and businesses. So we want to be there on hand to support that. You have two incredible local MPPs and parliamentary assistants with and both MPP Effie as well as MPP Mckenna. So I look forward to, you know, if there's anything that we can do from our side to facilitate those conversations. The $10 billion package that we announced for businesses through Minister Rod Phillips' financial update was just the first step. The government wants to continue working with businesses to really see how we can move this forward, how we can get Ontario back on track. And so we're going to be all ears, consulting with our chambers across the province, relying on our local MPPs to bring concerns from businesses up to Queen's Park, and look forward to working together, getting through this. But in final, I'll just thank you for the opportunity once again for being here, and look forward to working together to get through this, and working with all levels of government in this time to get our economy back on track and get the supports that all small and medium and businesses need in this province.
Great, thank you so much, Minister. And I'll just go to our other MPP, Effie, to see if she has any final thoughts that she'd like to share before we close things off.
Oh, thank you so much. I really like being called MPP Effie. I would just like to also add my words of thanks to the Chamber and to our federal colleagues, as well as my colleagues, MPP Mckenna and our Minister Sarkaria. I do believe that if ever there was an opportunity for us to all be Team Ontario and Team Canada, this crisis has brought us all together to be able to do the right thing and to work on behalf of the people of our province and our business community. I just have one small thing to add, and that is to do a bit of a shout out to those small businesses in our community who might actually want to take part in this mission of being able to procure and manufacture some of these essential supplies that we need. The government of Ontario set up a $50 million fund to support companies in order for them to retool and to build capacity. And so if any of you might be able to be in that category and wish to be involved in producing supplies and equipment for hospitals, our seniors' homes, and other critical public services, I suggest that you go to our government portal, Ontario Together. The number is 1-888-777-0554, 1-888-777-0554. Please pass on your ideas and your suggestions for us. So thanks very much to all of you today for participating.
Great, thank you so much for joining all of us and answering the many questions from our business community. And this was kind of just the tip of the iceberg in terms of questions, so thank you so much. So I'll let all of our great MPPs step off the line now. We'll just give you a little bit of an update on our next forum, which is April 16th, which will be taking place from 10:30 to 11:30. And that is very much a forum focused on small businesses. So that forum will have a number of speakers who are really focused in on those practical questions that you have of small businesses. That will include Kelvin Galbraith, our councillor for Ward 1, Lisa Kearns, our councillor for Ward 2, Brian Dean, Executive Director of the Downtown Business Association, Judy Worsley, Executive Director of the Aldershot BIA, Jenna Paletto, if you're not familiar, she's our Special Business Coordinator for our BIA, so she can answer those practical permitting, signage, what can I do while this essential services model is on. And then Stephanie Mazhari and Prince Khan from our Halton Region Small Business Centre, who again can provide you very practical hands-on support in terms of, cash flow and different questions like that small businesses have. We're also working on getting a representative from the banking sector, again, to answer those practical questions. If I want access to that 40,000, how does that work with my bank, and what could I do to get that? So we'll be releasing registration for those in the next week or so, hopefully the end of this week, and you'll be able to sign up for those on our Team Burlington page. And as we said before, please check the Burlington Chamber Team Burlington page, because that is updated on a daily basis as we get new resources in for you. And then we've also got a phone number. Obviously, you can all contact us by email, but we've also set up a business support line, 289-337-5505, extension 102. And you can reach us there to answer any practical questions or get support. Oh, and I'm just seeing registration is actually open, so you can go on and register for that live. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. Did you have any final thoughts you wanted to add, Carla?
No, other than that, we've recorded today's call. A link will be provided, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope it's been helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.